When we draft on the computer, we're creating a communication document to share our design ideas. An important part of drafting is visually depicting materials and heights. For example, let's look at this group of shapes. I have 4 rectangles and 1 circle. What do they represent? However, if I start changing line weights and line types, someone who understands drafting conventions will know this is a property line, this is a house, this is a tree, etc. It'll also be easier for someone who hasn't studied drafting to intuit what they're looking at. First, let's look at the line weights. Objects that are closer and therefore closer to the viewer in top plan view have a thicker line weight. For example, the house. To change the line weight of an object already in the file, use the selection tool in the basic tool set. Line weights can be changed in the attributes palette. Click on the drop-down to select another line weight. For this example, I'm going to use 0.7. Keep in mind, there's not an exact line weight that everyone should use to depict a house. However, line weights are relative. You shouldn't use the same line weight to depict the house and a paver patio. You want contrast between those line weights. By using thicker line weights for taller objects, you're adding dimension to a 2-dimensional drawing. Another drafting convention is showing material thickness. Objects such as houses, retaining walls, and raised beds are drawn with double lines to show the thickness of the material. Walls range anywhere between 6 to 12 inches. For house walls, pick a dimension and go with it. Here, we'll make the walls 6 inches thick. There's a great tool in the basic tool set called the offset tool. This will allow us to duplicate our original rectangle a specified distance from the original. First, we need to look at the settings in the mode bar. For this section, we'll select Offset by Distance. This second group of modes is pretty important though. The first option with the double line will create a duplicate offset of the original. The second option with the faint second line will reposition the original line. And then the distance by field is the desired distance for the offset, in our case 6 inches. Okay, so let's play it. First, the object has to be selected. If you select it prior to switching over to the offset tool, then you're ready to go. However, if you don't have anything selected or the wrong object is selected, there's a keyboard shortcut to select objects without switching tools. Hold down the Alt key and click the object. Great, now with the object selected, I can click inside the rectangle to duplicate the line 6 inches inside the original. I'm going to undo the command to show that the offset object will be larger or smaller depending on if I click on the inside or outside of the shape. Before we move on from walls, let's talk about retaining walls. Because house walls are significantly taller than most retaining walls, the line weights should be different. To show you this, I'm going to introduce you to another tool in the basic tool set, the double line tool. This tool will draw 2 lines, either constrained to an angle or on a diagonal. These red dots indicate the control line. The red dots represent mouse clicks, and the other line represents the placement of the second line. We have left, center, right, and custom. We also need to set the separation value before we start to draw. I'm going to go with a 6-inch wall drawn with a left control line, meaning that if I draw the wall counterclockwise or left to right, the second line will offset to the bottom of the screen. If I had drawn in the other direction, the offset would be inside the original rectangle instead of outside. If you want to draw in a clockwise direction from right to left, change the mode to the right control line. First, let's see what it looks like if we use the same line weight as the house. It's definitely coming off the page, but it looks equal to the house and not balanced against the paver patio. Now let's compare with a medium line weight. When you create 2 walls using the double line tool, it creates 2 separate lines. To select both lines, get the selection tool, select the first line, and while holding the Shift key, select the second line. I'm going to change the line weight to a medium value. Notice I still have depth in comparison with the patio, but it's not competing with the house. Next, let's look at the tree. I'm going to select the circle and change the line weight to 0.5. Once again, line weights are not prescriptive. Could it be 0.7? Yes. Could it be 1? Yes. Could it be 0.05? No. It needs to be one of the heavier line weights. There's also no need to be super exacting when it comes to line weights either. We don't need to assign a different line weight for a 40-foot tree versus a 20-foot tree. You can, it's a stylistic choice, but you can also keep it pretty simple. I usually only use 4 different line weights because it gives me the contrast I need to show dimension. Let's take a minute to talk about default settings. Right now I have the circle selected. I can tell that because it's highlighted in orange, and in the Object Info palette it shows it's a circle. The Attributes palette shows the line weight is 0.5. What happens if I draw a new shape? Let's draw a smaller circle inside the tree. Notice that even though when I started drawing, the Attributes palette showed the line weight as 0.7, the circle I just drew is 0.05. That's because anything new that I draw will reflect the default settings, not the changes made to the last object. To change the default settings, make sure you don't have anything selected. You can do that by either pressing the Escape key a couple of times, or with the Selection tool active, click on a blank area in the drawing. Now any changes you make in the Attributes palette will be reflected in the new objects that you draw. So we've seen you can set attributes before you start to draw or edit them afterwards. Let's go back to our tree. New plants are indicated by a dot in the center. Existing plants have an X or a cross. I prefer mine with a solid black fill. We'll cover that in another video. This larger rectangle represents a paver patio. I'm not going to make any changes here, as objects with minimal height get the thinnest line weight. The smaller rectangle represents a table. I will assign a medium line weight. The difference is pretty small, but I think it shows a little depth. Quick recap. We use line weight to add dimension to our drawings. Objects that are taller and therefore closer to the viewer have thicker line weights. Next up, we'll take a look at line types. What are they and when would you use them?